Hello and welcome to Photographic Connections, the podcast where we create connection to self, nature and others through the art of photography. My name is Kim Grant, the founder of Photographic Connections and your host for this podcast. And today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Jason Pettit onto the podcast. Jason is a Canadian artist who uses the medium of photography to connect with the natural world. We speak about his very close relationship with his local area, why he loves intimate and abstract photography, and how he sees his photography as an extension of himself and a collection of all of his previous life experiences. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jason Pettit. Hi Jason, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast this week. I'm really excited to speak with you because one of our lovely listeners recommended you as a potential guest, and having looked into your work, I think you're going to be a very interesting person to speak with because you clearly have a very deep emotional connection with nature, and there's some very interesting avenues that we can go down today. But before we do that, I wondered if you could share with everybody your journey of what got you into photography in the first place.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kim. It's great to be here. I love to talk about my passions with other people who are receptive to that. How I got started in photography, it seemed rather sudden. After a few years thinking about it, I think I was just looking for a creative outlet in my life, and I couldn't find one. And then one day I found myself ordering a camera online. So I just I'll give this a go for whatever. It was a lark. And then I started using it and I started getting into it, and everything kind of fell into place from there. And I started researching other photographers and their work, and then it became basically all I thought about. So.
Wow. It's interesting, your story, actually, because a lot of people have this deep connection almost with their creativity or photography from an early age. Sometimes it can be passed down from the family and that sort of thing. But I love that your story is very unique in many ways, that, you know, just looking for a creative outlet and photography came along. So I guess when you compare photography to other creative forms, what do you think it was about photography? Like, have you been maybe quite a technical person, or, what was it that drew you to photography particularly?
That's a good question. There was no other photographers in my family, so that wasn't I never even thought of photography as a creative outlet until later on. But I think what got me started in it really was, as a child, I grew up on a farm, and it was the 80s. I was let loose for hours on end to explore all the nooks and crannies. And he started noticing details about nature when you've been to the same place over and over and over again, right? So when you get that familiarity with a place, which I have, you start isolating more interesting details about it because you've seen the larger picture, right? The first time you're there, the first thing you notice is everything all together as a whole. But then after spending, a few years there, you start going, okay, I've seen that, and then you start looking for more entertaining things to look at, and that's when you kind of drill down to see those details. So over the years, growing up on the farm and then playing in the woods with friends and things like that, I think I was building up an inventory in my mind because I live in the same place where I grew up. So when I got started, I already knew where I wanted to go. I was taking photography, the images I was taking were much different than they are now, but I felt like I was kind of preconditioning myself without knowing it. So I think that photography gave me that outlet I didn't know I was looking for to express myself through my home. So it's kind of it's my conduit, I suppose.
Yeah. How lovely. It's really nice that you have this deep connection to where you were brought up. I mean, it's quite similar in many respects to my story. I've recently moved back to where I was brought up, and it's where the vast majority of my photographic inspiration comes from. It's like you say, it's like building that connection from a very early age and kind of getting to know the area, understand it, and see all the different details within it, which I think can be quite hard to do when we're traveling around all over the place. So you still live where you were brought up, as you just said, in Ontario in Canada. So what do you think it is about that local area that really interests you? Because your imagery is so beautiful, and you clearly see things that many people would simply walk by.
Well, I think, at least I've been told, that where I live is quite unique for Canada. Of course, being so familiar with it, you don't necessarily see it as unique. It's just your normal. But we have a lot of different kinds of landscape here. We're basically an island where I live. So there's a lot of shoreline, which is a great opportunity for imagery out there. The interaction with water and the shore and the sky. We've seen lots of images for that, so tons of opportunities. But we also have, woods and farmers' fields. So we have that. What we don't have, though, is grand scenery. We have the shoreline, which can be grand, but after a while, there's only so many images you can take of the shore and the water and the sky, the shore and the water and the sky, sunset, sunrise, So you start pointing your camera lens down a little bit more. But we don't have canyons, we don't have redwoods. So I think that's been fortunate for me for the style of photography that I've gotten into. This place is much better suited to small scenes and intimate nature photography than somewhere like Colorado in the United States, or even the Scottish Highlands, which I've only seen images of, but I'd really like to visit, and probably photograph badly for a while before I got the hang of it.
Yeah, I think it comes back, doesn't it, to building your connection with your local area. Like you say there about photographing other places badly, but it's like it takes that time to build up that connection, doesn't it? And you can really see that you've managed to do that in your local area, which is beautiful. I think to embrace your local area is such a positive message to share with people, because there's so many opportunities, isn't there?
Yeah, well, there is. Once you kind of, I think I kind of unlocked the key at some point, figuring out how to do photography like that. That changed a lot for me. The opportunities become, exponential. If you just, take a look around and imagine what a scene might look like after you've taken the image. So I've never run out of things to photograph. Mind you, I do go out quite often, and I don't take any pictures at all. That's just the way it goes, but that doesn't bother me so much anymore, because I know I'll have an opportunity to go back. So.
Yes, that's one of the benefits, isn't it, about photographing locally, is you have that opportunity to go back a lot easier than you would if you were travelling around. So you mentioned there that you go out quite a lot now and you don't always take images. How have you developed that ability to go out, I guess, without expectations and not be worried about not coming home with an image? Because that's something that some people struggle with. They struggle to just embrace the experience, and they want to always come home with something.
Oh, and I struggled with that too in the beginning. Yeah, you're right. You go out and you're telling yourself, okay, I'm out here to take a good photograph. And if that doesn't happen, you get frustrated, and then you tend to kind of maybe present not your best work because you were desperate to have something from that trip. So how I got away with that, I got sick of the frustration, I think. It happened quite a bit. As you get better, you start being a lot more picky about your own work. It isn't as good enough easily. You understand it's going to take some time to get a good image, and you can't just do it in one trip necessarily. So after a while, and also understanding that I could go back almost any time I wanted, I kind of backed off, and I had lost my path, I think, and went back to my roots of how I felt as a child in my home, finding these little nooks and crannies and taking pictures of them. So once I kind of clicked over to that mindset, I could go out now, and if I don't take an image I don't really care. It's never a waste of time if you like nature. I mean, we're nature photographers. Obviously, we have a connection to nature. So although we're also carrying a camera with us, we should also be happy to just be out there in nature, even if we come home with nothing.
Mm-hmm. What a beautiful thing there to reconnect with, is that childlike wonder and that ability to go out there and just explore. And this has come up in a few conversations now on this podcast, has been reconnecting with that inner child. And photography, for some reason, can give us that, especially nature photography, because we are going out there. And I guess when we're looking through the lens, it's almost like we're rediscovering the world again. You know, as a child, we're out there discovering the world and exploring, and then through our camera, we get to rediscover it and explore it once more. Is that kind of how you kind of feel it is?
No, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think once you start looking at the world through your camera, you're seeing it differently. Although you can see that connection with what you remember and what you understand, but seeing it through the camera kind of opens up a new element, a new level to it. And I find that very fascinating. So I kind of look through the viewfinder and what can I do with this scene? And sometimes, usually while I'm in the field, I'll know, okay, there's something here. And then I'll just slow down and stay there for a while and just work with the scene until I kind of calm down fully. And then that's when things get better, even if it's a simple scene. You never know. Like if you look at it at the right angle, you're connecting with yourself while you're out there, then what images you're taking are going to reflect that if you're fully there.
100%. That's such a beautiful, beautiful words there, Jason. Thank you. And I think what's so lovely when you look at your website is your tagline is emotions in nature. The emotional connection you feel when you're out there, and you use photography to connect with your emotions, don't you, and channel, what you're seeing. So I wondered if you could go a little bit into that. Explain how photography helps you connect with the world emotionally and express your emotions through a creative form.
Yeah. So I think that it helps me connect with my emotions, because I have come to the point where I can go to a place and calm down and connect with it. And that's my goal with photography, is not just to show other people my work, but also to connect with myself and learn something about myself. How I do that, I'm still kind of figuring that out. It's not an easy thing to consciously do, but I feel like I'm getting better and better, and it's helping me be a better person. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's lovely to have that kind of emotional outlet, that emotional connection, and finds a way to do that. And that kind of ties in with your artistic element, is it? You sort of see yourself as an artist working with the photographic medium rather than necessarily a photographer. So where did your kind of standpoint about that, come from? What made you want to be an artist rather than a photographer? Oh, that's a good question. I mean, sometimes I'm successful and my images are more artistic. Sometimes it doesn't work out. But that's my goal, I think. I just, if you approach photography as art, it's much more, it's more fulfilling, I think, because, like I said, you have to have that emotional connection. I could go out and just take photographs, and when I started, that's what I was doing. I was just taking photographs when what was in the image was what the photograph was. There's nothing else to it. But I started wanting to kind of unravel a puzzle, I think, where like my tagline, emotions in nature, comes from. I wanted to draw that puzzle out of nature. Okay, here's an image, but it's not just this old piece of driftwood. There's something else in it, and hopefully people can connect with that when they see the image like I do.
Yeah, you can really see there's definite feelings in your imagery. There's a lot of your photographs that you can look at for quite a long period of time, because you almost get sucked into the scene and into the intricacy of them. And there's many of your images that are very abstract in nature, and you can really see how you felt that scene and how you've gone on to compose and create your images in order to really give that almost sense of feeling, but also mystery in some cases, and discovery. I feel a real sense of discovery when I look at your photographs, which is such a beautiful thing to feel.
Oh, thanks. That's one of the highest compliments you can get, I think, as a photographer or an artistic photographer. So, yeah, it's very much how I want it to be.
Yeah. Brilliant. And I love as well that you see photography as an extension of life experience, which is one thing that I read on your website. I wondered if you could delve a little bit into what you mean by this.
Well, speaking to my previous comments, I mean, it's a connection to myself as well. So I want my photography to also be a part of me. And if it's a part of me, it will reflect my life experience. We're all the people we are based on everything that's happened to us previously, all the way back to the day we were born. So it's a culmination, I think, of understanding that allows you, if you can bring that experience and those emotions into your imagery, that's your life experience. And you're showing a bit of that to people. Yeah, definitely. That's a very, very kind of thought-provoking thing there, I think, to speak about. It's something that's, again, come up a couple of times as well, and when speaking with other people is, yeah, everything we've done in our life up until this moment makes up who we are now. And I feel when we can really put that into our imagery and feel through that, and I think it gets easier when we're photographing somewhere close to home, or that was, somewhere special to us at our childhood, like is the case in your work. You can definitely begin to put that life experience in, because you've grown and evolved in that one area. And it's almost like as you're growing and evolving and discovering yourself, you're also reflecting that through nature, which is beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's why I came to it a little bit later in life than some people would. I've only been photographing for 5 years, and maybe been photographing well for less than 2. So I guess I got started in photography when I was like 42 years old already. A lot of other people, of course, they grew up with a photographer in the family. They saw that, and then they too became a photographer. And so they approached the craft at a much earlier age. I'm a little jealous of that too, because these people that are my age, a lot of them have got 20 years experience, and it really shows. And I'm thinking, well, in another 20 years from now, I'm going to be slowing down a bit, so I better hurry up. So.
Not at all. I mean, it fascinates me when I read, and when you've just, kind of said there as well, that you've only been doing photography for 5 years, because the emotion, the abstract nature, the composition of your images, to me, they speak of somebody who's incredibly experienced. But I think how you've evolved so quickly in your craft has probably come because you had that connection from day one, and you've not kind of gone around trying to photograph things that maybe you've been told potentially make a good image. You've gone out there and really connected with yourself from day one, and that's shone from a really early stage, which is beautiful. And I think anybody listening to this that's just getting into photography potentially, it's like maybe if you can connect with yourself and your emotions from the beginning and really put your authenticity into your images, you will progress on such a quicker rate, I guess. I think you're a really good example of that, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of research in the beginning too. I sought out photographers whose images I liked, and I learned about them and their process. I think now more than ever, photographers have a real advantage to learn more exponentially. I don't want to, hold up social media as a great thing, but when you're able to go on to the computer and open up these pages that are full of all these different kinds of photographers, all their work, and you can see all the photographs from the greats from the past, like Ansel Adams or Elliot Porter or Galen Rowell. It's right at your fingertips. Before, if you wanted to do that, the only place you could learn about it is either find another photographer or go to the library and get a book out, or maybe you'd see an image or two in a magazine. Whereas now we can seek out our questions and get answers for them. So I think that's a big benefit. And I know that when I started, of course, I mean, everybody goes on the internet and they research, how do I work a camera even? It starts with that, and then you start researching photographers, and then you could find articles they've written. So it helps things move along a lot quicker, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more at our fingertips nowadays, isn't there? So we can learn and evolve and get going with these things a lot quicker. And I guess there's so much more inspiration as a result as well, which in some ways can be good, because especially if we're aware of who we are and what we want to do. But equally, there can be a lot of noise out there as well, which maybe puts some people off in directions that they maybe don't want to go in.
That's a very good point. Yeah, so that's a double-edged sword of social media right there. On one hand, it can be if you're careful and you curate, say, your Instagram feed or something, and have other photographers and artists who you admire. But on the other hand, you can fall down a rabbit hole and get carried away by the current zeitgeist, whatever that happens to be with photography. There's always one. Right now it's becoming AI imagery, for instance. So, and that's going to change the landscape of photography, no pun intended. But I think you have to be very careful out there. Yeah, it's like anything. You can abuse it, or you can use it to your benefit.
100%. I mean, the AI world is certainly an interesting discussion, isn't it? But I think maybe photographers like yourself that come from that place of genuine expression and the artistic side, that you can experience that, through AI. For me, it's all about going out into nature and channeling our emotions and connecting with nature. And, and when we're sitting on the computer creating AI images, you're not getting any of that. It's got its place 100% for those who enjoy that kind of thing. But equally, I think that it's the person, isn't it, behind the camera that's going to make things moving forwards.
No, you're right. And my own view of it is AI is for the viewer. There isn't much of a creator behind it. And when you, like you say, when you remove that human element, I think you're going to notice, and the end product's not going to shine out, or it's not going to be lasting. I mean, it's easy to see a perfectly wrought AI image and go, wow, look at the color, that's amazing. But then by the end of the day, you've probably forgotten about it because you've seen 10 more almost exactly like it. With keeping the human element in it, it's got that special sauce, I think, that, in some cases can make a lasting image.
Definitely. It's like the energy of that moment has been almost channeled through the photographer and put into that image. And then because it's been created by a human, it then speaks to us as humans. And there's like just that missing element, as you rightly say there, with AI, which is, yeah. So I guess in terms of your photographic process, when you go out into nature to find imagery and to connect with it, how do you go about looking for things to photograph? Do you plan your photo shoots, or do you just kind of go out when you feel like it and see what you come across?
I plan them to a very small extent. I might look at the weather that day and decide, well, this area here will have good light today, or it was windy yesterday and the sand dunes that I live nearby will look really cool. There'll be some patterns, so that might draw me there. But yeah, very much so when I'm out there, I pick my general location and then I just wander around, looking at everything. I don't walk too fast or I'll miss something. Stop often, try something out, move on. It's very relaxing in a way. You're just puttering about the landscape, I guess. It looks strange to some people when I come across them. They don't know what's what I'm doing. I have a camera, they can tell that much, and then they just shake their head and move on usually.
And what sort of things do you find draws you in? Is it often the light or the textures or, yeah?
It's not, I'm finding it's not the light as much anymore. I found that kind of limiting. I do enjoy good light, don't get me wrong. The golden hour is fantastic. It can draw patterns and textures out. But I didn't want to limit myself to just a couple hours of the day, so I started going out any time. My favorite time to photograph is probably when there's even light, so of cloud cover. I just find for some of the images it works better to have that even light without the sunlight kind of either coloring the photo or adding a shadow on it that doesn't really work with the whole. So I try to work with flat light, even light most of the time. But I'm open to anything, really.
It's really interesting to hear that, because I think especially in like the landscape photography world, there's this preconceived idea that you need dramatic light, so you need golden light, or showers and sunshine and whatnot. But it's lovely to hear somebody like yourself who mostly works with the overcast grey days, because they're often the days when people are like, oh, there's nothing to photograph. But there is, because the light is diffused. And I always say to people, you can get good images in all weather conditions. You just got to adapt to them and photograph the right subjects. Is that kind of what you found as well?
Exactly. Yeah. Certain scenes don't work well in the sunlight. I've trying to do photography in the autumn when the leaves are in full color and full sunlight is very confusing. First of all, the leaves are all, blasting color everywhere, and then you have the sunlight adding its color into everything, and it just becomes, I can't translate that scene very well. So that's just one example of when I don't want sunlight for sure. I would concentrate on something else, I guess, in the landscape if it were a day like that in the autumn.
Brilliant. Yes, it's definitely good to share these things, because sunlight can be such a difficult thing to work with, but equally it can be great for like illuminating leaves and backlighting things, and it all depends, doesn't it, on what you're looking for and what style of photography you do.
Yeah, it does. I mean, sometimes I'll go out full sunlight, and it's which is traditionally the hardest time to photograph, when the sun's not in the golden hour, but. If you look at the right spaces, you can find some nice backlighting. There's scenes out there everywhere. So, or if you don't like it that much, go somewhere in the woods where there's no sun getting on the ground anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, very true, very true. And there's like a message in your work as well that you want to portray to people, that there's more to nature than what's viewed on the surface. So how do you, when you see something in nature, let's say a tree, for instance, how do you go on from simply photographing the tree to really connect with it more deeply so that you can begin to show what's below that surface?
That's a good question, and it's kind of like the spirit of that kind of photography, and explaining it is very difficult. I think that for your example of the tree, you have to have some sort of, I guess I look for patterns and shapes and similarities, like does this tree remind me of a character in a book I read or something like that. You have to make that little connection to something else in your life, and then once you've done that, it helps you kind of set up a composition. Woodland photography, of course, being very challenging, and I do some of it, but it is very hard to isolate a sort of a series of patterns that work together in that situation. So I guess that's where I start when I view a scene like that. Most humans are very good at seeing patterns and designs. So I try to kind of look at it, because you look at it, it's like, why am I drawn to this scene? There must be something here. Why am I looking at it? What interests me about this particular tree? And then sometimes as well reminds you of something else. And now, so from there on, you're trying to show through your photography what that reminds you of.
Yes, definitely. It's I love that you said some questions there, because I definitely feel like that's what I do as well when I'm out with my camera. I think, what's drawing me in here? Why have I stopped? What is it about this subject? And when we start to ask those questions, we can then answer them. And then that can formulate how we then go on to create our images. But you need that time, don't you, to walk around slowly and to connect.
Yeah, it's important not to rush for my own process, and it sounds like yours as well. Or you're going to miss that. You're just going to rush through the scene, and you won't see anything.
Yeah, it's almost like a therapeutic exercise as well, isn't it? Like when you were saying earlier that photography is like an expansion of your life experience. It's like when you're out there asking these questions, I realise when I'm doing workshops and stuff that everybody's drawn to something different. You might take somebody onto a beach and somebody wants to photograph the sea and somebody wants to photograph the pebbles and somebody's photographing the sand. And it's like everybody is naturally drawn to different things. And when we can give people the freedom to do that, they naturally create images that speak to them more. But equally, a lot of people can struggle with that slowing down, because I think it is a very introspective internal process, isn't it? And it's then bringing that out to create creative imagery that really speaks from the heart.
Yeah. That must be very challenging in a workshop setting as well. I mean, for you have a finite amount of time. You have a bunch of different people with all different likes and desires, and maybe this is the only time they've been able to get out photographing that year. They're too busy. They've gone to the workshop. So I think you could bring some intense feelings along with you that would kind of block you from your own emotions. Being able to, if you can, and this is why photographing at home is important to everybody, I think, because it allows us to get out more than just going on that epic trip to Iceland or going on a lot of workshops. You still need to be able to take that information you learn from that maybe very intense, full of people workshop and practice with it on your own. So.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a process, isn't it? I really struggle to do the traditional workshops of going to very different places and showing people different places and trying different things. It's like I try and spend a good kind of 3 hours in each location so people can really immerse themselves. And some people find it really easy and they can find loads to photograph, and other people just don't, they're just like, there's just not enough here. But it's about trying to help them calm down and settle into it and open their vision up to more, because there's always more. It's just you just need the time to do it. But of course everybody's process is different, so it can be a challenge. Yeah.
Yes, I can imagine. I've only done one workshop before, and it was hard having a group of people, and you have to lead it and direct people, but at the same time you're dealing with X number of individuals who all have different tastes and desires. So if you're trying to instill, like you said, maybe just if they can learn nothing else than just going out into nature and slowing down and taking a look, then that would be a great asset for them when they get home and go out in their own neighborhood.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing I'd love to end on with you is to kind of go back to the nature perspective. Why do you think it's nature photography that you got into and not any other form of photography?
That's a great question. When I started photographing, I did actually take some architectural photos as well. Looking back on them, they're actually much better than my first nature photographs. But at the end of the day, I think what I wanted out of this hobby was something relaxing and therapeutic, and I've always been able to draw that from nature more than anything else. So, not that I hate people, But to get into that relaxing meditative mindset for myself anyway, I need to be alone. So nature is the obvious choice. And it's beautiful. I love the way it looks. Why not go out? And even more so with nature photography, if you don't make a photograph, you still had a successful outing. Whereas if you're a portrait photographer or something like that, if you don't make a photograph, you're going to get fired.
That's very true, isn't it? And I guess it's part of it, isn't it? That the experience for me has always been so much more important than the final photographs. And I guess you feel that as well in your work.
I do, yes. And you know, I do. I love making a great photograph. It can't happen every time, but that's okay. You work with what you got, and it makes the ones that are successful even more fulfilling. You know, say it's been a month since you've taken an image you like, and then you get one, and then you kind of go, aha. So you kind of start going uphill in your skill set again. I find I plateau a lot. I think it was in Lenswork magazine, somebody called it the Plateau of Despair, where you know you're flatlining, right? You know, you're in this creative drought, and you know it's frustrating, and you know what's happening, but eventually you'll break out of it. I think when you know you are having a creative drought, it means you are working on a new way of thinking and photographing, because that, if you know you're kind of stalled out, means you're kind of tired of the way you've been doing things, and now you need to elevate yourself and your work. Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been such a joy speaking with you today, Jason. There's a lot of nuggets of wisdom in what you've shared, and I think it'll hopefully help people think a little bit about their process and maybe some inspiration. And if they go on to look at your images as well, I think people will really feel that emotion. For those listening, I'd highly recommend doing so, because there's definitely a lot to explore in your imagery, and it's like a journey, I think, when I look at your photographs. So with that in mind, if people would like to see your images and connect with you, where can they go to do so? My website would be the best place. That's www.jasonpettit.ca.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Brilliant. And I'll put that in the show notes below. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, it's been great speaking with you, Kim. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this week's podcast. If you'd like to get further involved with Photographic Connections, including joining our members' online community, or if you'd like to connect further with me and come on some of my workshops or get some mentoring, you can find all the details in the show notes below. And now that this podcast has come to an end, there's only one thing left for you to do. It's time to pick up your camera and head outdoors. There's so many incredible photographic opportunities just waiting for you to discover.